Joining us today, I'm very pleased to welcome to the Northern Miner podcast for this week's Spotlight, Brent Johnson, Vice President, Environmental Performance and Sustainability at Dundee Sustainable Technologies. Brent, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adrian. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to have you, Brent. We've talked with Jean-Philippe May. It's great to have another part of the team from Dundee Sustainable Technologies on the program. So I've had Jean-Philippe on a couple of times, but for those who are unfamiliar with Dundee Sustainable Technologies, could you give us a little bit of background on the company and what you guys are up to?
Yeah, I first met the Dundee team when I was at the Tsumeb smelter, which was a Dundee precious metals asset a number of years back. And I was responsible for environmental management there. And one of our key legacy and operational issues there was this ongoing stockpile of arsenic trioxide, which is a byproduct of the complex copper concentrate that gets smelted there. So obviously arsenic trioxide being a pretty hazardous material, lots of political risk associated with it. There was quite a bit of community unhappiness, and we had to try and get our head around this massive elephant in the room in northern Namibia that no one really understood. That's how I encountered the then team of Dundee, who had this solution around potentially treating and stabilizing arsenic and turning it into a vitrified product, which I'll talk a little bit about just now. And this, for me, was really cutting-edge science applied and demonstrably to a real-world situation. So fast forward a few years later, I found myself joining Dundee. And my role, in addition to sort of, business development in Africa and Europe and more geographically where I'm focused, is principally environmental performance. What I need to do, or what I need to be doing, is to understand and illustrate and prove and demonstrate that consistently our two principal processes, which is what we're selling out to the market, do what they say from an environmental and sustainability performance point of view. Are they lowering the ESG risk? Can we quantify it? Is it performing according to industry benchmarks that we measure ourselves in? Because this is the real crux of what we're selling, is effectively not only do our processes perform commercially and produce gold just as well as cyanidation, but they do that better from an environmental performance point of view, and we can clearly show that. So how do we lower ESG risk for a mining company that comes along, or a smelting company that comes along and says, we want to see if our product is amenable to your process? How does that perform, both currently and in the long term?
Just out of curiosity then, you mentioned ESG, and it was all the rage for about, I want to say 7 years in the industry. But where are we at now with ESG in 2026? With the Trump administration, there is concern among the environmentalists, and it doesn't really get voiced that often as it takes a backseat to the economic imperative. There is a concern that the environment is, taking a backseat, so to speak. Where are we at with ESG in 2026?
When we talk about environment, it's not that immediate impact always of a water quality change or of a groundwater contamination issue. It's the long-term stuff of a tailings facility that doesn't need to be a traditional wet tailings facility that sits during a mine's lifetime and well beyond it and presents a latent risk to life in many respects if it hasn't been engineered properly. And we've seen these every few years. You're going to see failures. And the data shows that these failures are climbing with very serious consequences. And it's not the hard and fast, strict green stuff. It's the social and community stuff where this is interwoven, where we're seeing lots of pressure for communities. And in the case of Canada, for instance, recently First Nation groups sticking their hands up and saying, we want to have more of a say in the mechanics and the chemistry of what a mining group applies to our land for the 10 or 15 years that they're going to be there. And that's where we're seeing quite a bit of interest. Industry is our principal clients. These are the guys we work with. We work with some wonderful industry players who are increasingly seeing the benefits of our technology. But more and more, it's the communities that are saying, hey, let's look at a cyanide-free alternative. At least look at it. The mining industry, the sector, it's slow. It's almost dinosaur-like and sometimes in its will to change. And mining projects take a long time to come on stream. And, heavy capital, that's the nature of the beast here. But I think slowly we want to provide an alternative to that orthodoxy. But it's got to be proven, it's got to be commercially viable, and it's got to be mature and demonstrated. And I think if I can just jump into our clever process, which is the cyanide-free alternative to gold extraction, also works for copper and palladium, but let's just focus on gold. The perception out there is that cyanide's been around for 100 years. We just carry on doing this. We don't ask any questions, and we deal with the consequences as we may. And the perception in industry, perhaps, falsely is that these cyanide-free or alternative technologies are either more dangerous than cyanide, which is patently not the case, or they're not demonstrated, they're not proven. And that might have been true 20, 30, 40 years ago, but right now we're sitting with technology that is, in our case, certainly got 12, 13 years worth of data. It's robust, it's mature. We have a plant where we can show at a rate of 5,000 tons per year that this works. So it's about so much of what I do, what JP does, and what I quite enjoy doing is the educational stuff, changing mindset, talking to industry, talking to consultants. So those consultants that go out there and get commissioned to do the 43 101s, or the pre-feasibilities, the scoping, they're going to default always to strict cyanide approach. And yes, it's in some cases that's appropriate. And it's almost like the whole coal green energy debate as an analog. Coal's not really going anywhere because there's such a whole high base load requirement, but there are these other cleaner alternatives. So it's about getting people to think differently and saying, here's a product, let's give it a try, be curious. And, encouragingly, we're seeing more and more of that sort of uptake. If you're seeing a resource that's complex, that's got lots of arsenic as an example, you've got an ore out there that is not amenable to cyanide and will present a difficult long-term ESG risk. In the past, people have backed away from it because there hasn't been a solution particularly, but we believe there is. And I think, with the gold price being where it is, generally lots of activity, all the easy stuff in many jurisdictions has been mined out. So, the stuff that was complicated has been left. Now, financially, that might become more attractive and more possible. And guess what? The technology's moved on from 20 years ago. There is a way to attack that, process it safely and sustainably.
So who should be interested in this? I guess it's mining companies that are producing? Is it exploration companies? Who should be interested? And what do you have, in a sense, lay it out in simple terms here? What products does Dundee Sustainable Technologies have? Put it all together for us.
Let me just summarize. So we've got two metallurgical processes. These are our processes. These are our products. The one is Clever, which is a cyanide-free gold processing technique, which uses two main reagents. It's sodium hypochlorite, which is bleach, and then a catalytic amount of sodium hypobromide to rapidly bring gold in solution. I'm not going to get deep into the technical stuff. That's all on our website. There's no cyanide. There's no chlorine gas. So in addition to excluding cyanide completely, this process is closed loop, rapid kinetics. The plant sizes are smaller than cyanidation equivalents, for instance. And also critically, it produces a dry tailings of a moisture level less than 20%. And the tailings is typically acid depleted, it's benign. So you don't have a tailings dam in the traditional sense. So these are very significant positives, and we believe, in addition to excluding cyanide completely, of course. And this is massively important for ESG risk reduction post-closure as well. A mining group can not have the asset retirement obligations associated with a tailings dam, which are sometimes massive. So that's our one process. The second process, and these processes can be used jointly or separately, as I'll explain, is called glass lock, and that is a vitrification process which converts or stabilizes arsenic trioxide associated with mining processes, either historical. In Ghana, we're involved in a project. We're going to construct a plant to deal with a 50-year-old legacy stockpile of arsenic trioxide, turn it into glass, which is then safe. It meets and exceeds US EPA requirements to classify it as non-hazardous. Okay, so it's recognized as the vitrification as the method for stabilizing products like arsenic trioxide. And arsenic trioxide can be from a smelter, it can be from an ore. We can separate it out of an ore, pull the arsenic out, deal with that safely and sustainably, and process the gold. And as I say, this is a technique that renders the material safe over, geological timescales, as it were. You'd probably know about the issues in Giant Mine in the west of Canada as well. 200,000 tons of material up there of arsenic trioxide that has just been buried. It's been put in a hole in the ground and left, and they have what's called a frozen block model approach. But we believe there's a better and safer way of dealing with arsenic trioxide particularly. So those are our two processes. They're not separate by any means, but they can be, if you know what I mean. There are projects that we're involved with where we're only dealing with arsenic trioxide. There are projects where we're taking an ore that's high in arsenic and a concentrate that's high in arsenic, and we're taking that arsenic out so that the producer of that ore doesn't get penalized out in market, and they can send that concentrate out, and that arsenic is then dealt with safely and is rendered non-hazardous. In a nutshell, lots of information on our website, and I'm always happy to talk a lot about this stuff and educate. And I think, just to end off, Adrian, maybe if I give you an idea of who we're talking to, then it's everyone from, senior technical and executive leadership in senior gold producers, right down to community groups or to First Nation groups or to any stakeholders are interested in hearing more about the alternative. You have this massive lurking giant of cyanidation as the only way out there to viably and commercially and long-term process and extract gold. It's just simply not the case anymore. That's our mission, that's our objective, and that's who we are as DST.
Brent Johnson, Vice President, Environmental Performance and Sustainability at Dundee Sustainable Technologies. Thank you for joining us and telling us
Thank
all
you.
about what you're working on.
Thanks so much for the time.